Hello, family. How you doing? This is your brother Vladimir D. Peace to you, peace to your home, peace to your family, peace to your community, peace to your ancestry, peace to my community, peace to my ancestry, and peace to the nation that you are and they are building. Peace also to the godly forces, the great spirit above, the mother earth below. This is Mtima Radi. How y'all doing? The metaphysical importance of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And if he had lived, Medgar Evers, because Medgar Evers was calling for a Mau Mau. He was calling for a Mau Mau revolution in the South, man. And you know, he was calling for a Mau Mau revolution in the South, and I'm not going to get into that so much because he had a huge revolutionary spirit, and we have to understand. I'm going to say some things that are going to seem hard to believe, some of which has it's been brought to me by elders and videos that they have posted, videos that are some of them are years old, some of them are decades old, but the ancestors really want to get into this today because we need to understand the significance as we move into the 2020s, which the next 20 to 30 years for Black people should be very revolutionary. White folks know this. They know the prophecies. They know the coming of the great shaking of the earth is going to also bring Black people to the forefront because we are the saviors for this country and this world. We are the splitters of the earth seed. Earth is not, and I'm going to say this early and I'm not really going to elaborate on it. Earth is not what you think it is. The soul of earth is so powerful. And we are the keepers of its vibratory frequency. And when we are done with initiating that vibratory frequency, which we are to do at the end of this century, the earth will go through a transformational phase, a vibratory acceleration, which we already feel it. This is cosmic. This isn't us yet. And it will cause it to move into another dimension, the same dimension, but it's like HD radio. You have one station, but you have variations of it. And Earth is supposed to be moving into that a new variation state as this one decays and dies away. So when it moves into that state, radical changes will occur on this planet. They'll happen so radically, but it will be the funniest darn thing because people's minds will shift and the world will become anew. And it'll happen in the blink of an eye. One day you will go to sleep and you'll wake up, and time zone by time zone you'll wake up and the world will be new and you won't be able to explain it. In fact, you won't even recognize that there's a difference. That's the intriguing part. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. They were prophesized. I heard an elder speak years ago, and I say years ago, this is a couple years back, on the intrigue of the 1929s. And literally, like there was a 3-year period of like 1928, 29, 30, and maybe 31, where it just seemed like this incredible power base was born. There was this incredible power base was born. And Martin fell into that. I know Malcolm didn't fall into that. I don't believe Malcolm fell into that. He might have. But there seemed to be this planetary alignment that gave rise to this powerful group of people that came to a head in the late 50s and to the mid to late 60s. It was like a 12-year period. And there was many more. We don't know their names, a lot of them, or we have forgotten their names, but they were there. Now, the reason why Martin Luther King, at a young age, was seen as extraordinary by his family. Even by the standards of his family, he was extraordinary. And so he was given every opportunity, and it wasn't unnecessary. It wasn't unusual, not unnecessary. It wasn't unusual for middle-class black families to do this. You know, we have to remember, Dr. King came from a pretty stable, wealthy black family. And so he was given every opportunity to shine. That's why he graduated school at the age of 15. He was out of high school at the age of 15. They seen his extraordinariness, not a word, but it is a word for right now. So he went and he got to learn and he got to build himself up. Now, understand that when you look at a society, you have to look at it like a body. And each major system is like a major system. Each major societal system is like a bodily system. So you're talking the electrical grid, which ironically is not your nerve grid. It would be more like your lymphatic grid. Well, no, that would be your garbage. So maybe we can keep that as a nerve grid. So we'll keep it. We'll make it just simple and say it's the nerve grid. And within those systems, you have what they call power centers. Well, in the body, you have power centers too. And your power centers are your chakras. So Dr. King started in the middle of the body and worked his way up. And he did. He was almost born and bred for that. It was almost, his father, seemed to have a little bit of a plan for him. And I think the whirlwind of history caught him and pulled him in another direction. But his father kind of knew where he wanted him placed. And so Dr. King worked up from that. Malcolm started, Dr. King started at the heart chakra and moved up. Not necessarily to the crown, but maybe to the eye. And Malcolm started at the root chakra. Now, the root chakra is at the base of the spine. And he ain't move up. If anything, he might have descended just a little bit. Just a little bit. And maybe it's unfair to say that he started at the root chakra. Maybe he started more around the navel and then descended into the root chakras in the lower portion of the root chakras, which is more towards the knees or the thighs. In fact, that's actually an apt statement. I was reading this book last year on the Body Politic, and that's a phrase you don't tend to hear anymore, but it's a real phrase. And this writer wrote this book in the 1600s. It was just translated into English. She likened the poorest portion of any country. She was writing in Europe at the time, of any country, to the thighs and the legs. And she stated in the book that, look, most wealthy people look at these people as being insignificant. She said, I believe they're the most important portion of the society. Without them, you have no rest. You have no body because you can't move it. They keep you living. So yeah, maybe Malcolm started at the navel and worked his way down. But either way, the two of their paths couldn't be more different. They couldn't be more different. And I want to show you the beauty of the ancestors. Because if you're going to have, and white folks know this, white folks have significantly studied Martin King and Malcolm X. They have traced this stuff. They know the metaphysical importance of the both of them. That's why they reproduce Malcolm X. Oh, let me tell you that again. They reproduce Malcolm X in your music, but you don't realize it. You don't realize that a lot of the hip hop stuff, a lot of the intonements, the inflections, that they utilize, they draw heavily from Malcolm X. They draw heavily from the Black Panthers. They draw heavily from Martin Luther King, even, to give you this projection, but they pervert it. Well, that's a little side note. So Malcolm fell. And let me tell you the significance of this. There is actually an alchemical significance of this when it comes to Malcolm X. And this is also why Dr. King was assassinated at what was considered the lowest point of his social career. Because the alchemical process demands for the most brilliant substances to be produced. And this is public information, man. You can literally go online and you can find out this stuff. This isn't, like I ain't revealing secrets to you. This is just stuff that we don't tend to look at. Alchemical process says for the most brilliant metals to be created, you have to have a decomposition point. So that which you are has to be decomposed to the extent that it is almost unrecognizable, that you dissolve into yourself. And then from the dissolving, there's an analogy that I'll use in a moment. From the dissolving into yourself, you lose the resistance of yourself and your soul. There's a little bit of a barrier between the two of them, yourself and your soul. There's the personality, there's the soul, and then actually there's another one, which is an integrating force, which is what you're trying to get to, and that's the spirit, because the spirit holds your true essence of what you are supposed to be. Your spirit holds your true essence of what you are supposed to be. So there's in the spirit, really, and this is the funniest darn thing, it exists, but it doesn't exist. Your spirit exists on a couple of levels. The first one is the biological level, which we all know because we can feel our heartbeat. We can feel the air going through us. We can see if you actually get measured, you actually have a lot of vibrational frequencies working through you. It creates a unified hum, a symphony. When everything is working well in your body, there's a symphony. Most of the black people you see walking around here, they're fat, they're overweight. It is because the symphony has been broken. They're eating stuff that has their symphony off. We have to change the way we eat and change the way we treat each other. See, the old way wasn't working, so it's on us to do what we got to do to survive. Now, when you go through a decomposition process, it's like the acorn in the ground. The acorn wants to bring forward a tree. In the acorn, it has the spirit of a tree locked into it. Not only a small tree either. It has a spirit of how big that tree is going to ultimately be. You carry around an acorn. You carry around a huge handful of acorns. You are carrying around a small forest with you. A small forest with you. So once when you put that acorn into the ground and it descends into the ground and you cover it with dirt, what does it do? It decomposes. You can't go to a single tree and find an acorn at the center of its roots. It decomposes, shoots down with a root before shooting up into the air. And that spirit starts to live, taking the soul. The soul is inside the spirit, which is the most incredible thing ever. It's like an egg and a yolk. The soul is inside the spirit. So as the spirit grows and you see the tree growing, that's the spirit controlling a lot of that. You see you don't realize that the soul is in there also. For humans, because we are sentient, we have to go through the same process. When we are children especially, our soul, because of the society that we live in, our soul is encouraged to be repressed. So our spirit is encouraged to be active. We are encouraged to do everything from the spirit level. Now, there are some people who are spirit and not soul. They don't have a soul. They're just spirit. Not all of them are psychopathic, but most of them are. So we are encouraged to do that. So when we get to the point where our our spirit no longer has a role in growing our body, meaning biologically, the body can't grow anymore. So now the spirit is there just maintaining the vital signs. Our soul wants to unify with it. And then unify with our personality. The personality is something completely different. It's about mentality and psychology and all this other stuff that I'm not going to get into. But our soul yearns to do that, yearns to take it all over. And there's a biological element that is who we are, that is in our lower intestines, but I'm not also going to get into that either. So you have to go through the most spiritually not challenging, but rewarding. The most spiritually rewarding journeys are those that call us to decompose ourselves. Malcolm started, I used the chakra analogy. Let me be very, very clear when it comes to him as an acorn. He started on the top of the ground and then got buried into the ground as a kid and as a teenager. He was from the streets, as they said in rap music for a long time. He was from the streets. But then he descended into the underbelly of the streets. And just when he was about to be snatched away by the forces of death that not only wanted to see him decomposed, but wanted to see him destroyed, much like the bacteria in that acorn or around that acorn when you put it into the ground, they're at it because they want to turn it into fertilizer. Another power rises though and says, what you destroy, you unleash. They brought Malcolm X so low that they threatened to destroy him. And the spirit inside of him, moved by the divine, said, what you destroy, you unleash. And then he was put in an even more isolated place. And that was prison. And in that moment, it's the sperm and the egg getting together. And in the moment of the sperm touching that center of the egg, what happens? A force encapsulates the egg. Nothing can permeate it. The egg becomes a prison. And inside that prison, cells start to grow. Now, Malcolm went into prison. That permeation happened. Or not permeation, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, he did. That permeation happened. I apologize, ancestors. I won't cut you off again. That permeation happened. He went into prison. And what happened to him? He decomposed to the point where that outer shell broke, ripped off. And now in that prison cell, he was faced with himself. They used to call him, I think it was the devil or something like that, or Satan or something like that. I think it was Satan. And the reason why is because he would have, in the dark of darkness, man, when he was isolated, he would have these fits. And what that was all of these false cells fragmented, thrown out. And he was confronted with all the portions of his personality, all of the portions of his spiritual power that could have been wielded for their original purpose. He was confronted with those, now being projected out as if in a fun house with those mirrors. And he couldn't see himself. He couldn't see the trees that he was supposed to be. He couldn't see the tree he was supposed to be because of all of this fragmentation. In other words, he was now in He was in the egg. And now he was producing all of these cells. And to the naked eye, to him included, there wasn't any concrete process behind that fragmentation. There wasn't any. But the spirit memory, the spiritual memory, that ancestral memory that was deep within him said, oh yeah, there's a reason for this. And soon came the lifeline. Like I said, that shoot goes down into the ground first before it starts making its way up from that acorn. So soon came that lifeline. He started reading. And all of those spiritual uncertainties that had led to that fragmentation started evaporating. The boundaries of that acorn that had been attacked, if you would, not attacked, but had been threatened to be consumed by the natural forces of decomposition of the earth. That boundary held so that only that root going down and that shoot going up could permeate. And that's what happened with Malcolm. That's what happened with Malcolm. In fact, the acorn started to expand just like the egg does. And Malcolm started with all of those fragmented personality, that fragmented spiritual energy around him, started forcing it from a soul level, which now is commanding the spirit in him, forward. There's a plan inside of us, he said. There's a plan inside of me, should I say, not inside of us, but inside of me. And though he was still being ripped apart, he quieted his mind and started working towards that plan, that quiet certainty that people tell us about. Some of us have experienced it, that quiet certainty when you know you're doing what you need to be doing. And even though there's a million things on your mind that's pulling you everywhere, you're still focused. And as he moved through the process of being focused on what he is supposed to be, what he was supposed to be, what happened? Those fragmented pieces started finding their way back to where they originally were. The psychopathy which was forced upon him by the society was broken. It's kind of funny, we forget psychopathy. The primary word of psychopathy is pathy. P-A-T-H-Y. Pathy. Path. Path. Look it up, pathos. Pathos. That's where it comes from. Psychopathy. Path. Pathy. That was broken. And now, all of those fragmented cells in that egg started having purpose. Started having meaning. And they started integrating themselves. Again, the soul was now calling them back home. And that energy was being directed. So by the time when he went to work for the Nation of Islam, when he got out of prison, he was now a twig. That acorn was now a twig. And he now had to grow. And he did. But there's a second death that happens with that acorn. And this is, and it's not, it's often imperceivable. Because at this time, if you were to dig up that sapling, now it was not even a sapling anymore, that twig, I don't know what the official word is for it, but that small tree, what you'd see is that acorn was gone. You can't see it anymore anyway. So it's dead, right? Wrong. Because the acorn is about yay big. It's about yay big. So the acorn has this shoot now growing out of it. And that acorn will expand a little, if I remember correctly, as that shoot is going up and those roots are going down and all over the place. So it expands to a certain point, and then it stops expanding. That shoot will get to a point where the expanded circumference of the acorn is its limit. But that tree is going to be much bigger than the circumference, even the expanded circumference of that acorn. That is the second death, when it breaks through that wall of the expanded circumference of the acorn, and it goes bigger than the acorn. Because now you have the spirit taking over, which is led now by the soul. And you have the soul being transposed over the spirit. Why? Because even though there is the higher intelligence, which is sown into the spirit, the ultimate goal of the Most High is to have the soul act as a divinity on this realm and in this realm. Malcolm X's second death happened, should I say, started in 1963 and culminated when he left the Nation of Islam. White folks knew this, and they feared him for it, because now Malcolm wasn't no longer, when he left prison, Malcolm was no longer in the thighs of society. Malcolm was in the navel of the society, but he was at a different degree of development in the navel of society. If we want to put him there originally, which I made that argument, I'd probably retract that a little bit and say maybe he was more in the root where I began at. I gave him some credit early, but he was now back in the navel, and he was at a different degree. And he moved when he left prison, he was at the navel, but he was at a different degree of development. When he left the Nation of Islam, he was now where? He was in the solar plexus and moving up to the heart of the nation. He had ascended very, very rapidly, very quickly, to a point of prominence. Now, to switch to King was far different. King, I think, had already amassed that first death in another lifetime, maybe in a couple of lifetimes previous. So King moved up from the heart, and maybe saying he was at the heart is a little bit generous to him. Maybe he was more at the solar plexus, but he didn't move up here originally. He moved up here. He moved to the larynx. And if you look up the chakric value of the larynx, you'll see why he moved up there. And when he came into the national consciousness, he was in the larynx already. And if not in it already, he was very close to it. And for the first 5 or so years of his nationally public life, he circled the chakra of the larynx, and then started moving up towards this one, to your third eye. That's a heck of a trek. Because you got to bypass this, which is a lesser chakra, but nonetheless as important. So we had to go up through there and then finally end up here. And he did. That was 1964 for him. Now, it is harder from an alchemical standpoint to really get into Dr. King, because I, truthfully, to be honest with you, I have not analyzed him from an alchemical standpoint, so much so as Malcolm is the important one for us. He's an important one for us because we started low, and they have to explain to us why so many of us are allowed to have the opportunity to move up and to go through the alchemical process of death and rebirth. Dr. King, people always give him the Albany. The Albany campaign, the failure in the Albany campaign is seen as a point of defeat and humiliation. That's his death point. That's his acorn being dissolved. That's his acorn being dissolved. You know, Malcolm was, you couldn't, man, that's unscripted. Some people said that, too much of Dr. King's rise was scripted. They may have not been lying about that. Because Albany, yeah, it was a defeat, but it wasn't his major defeat. Oh, no. No. Dr. King was still rising at the point of Albany. He took a little check back, but he was still rising. His star hadn't even begun to fade. And the reason for this is because Dr. King still hadn't made the trek down yet. He still hadn't relinquished his previous position. Whereas Malcolm had relinquished his previous position and then some, and then was through that rebirthing process had to climb back up. It wasn't till 65 and 66 when Dr. King made the decision, the pilgrimage, if you would, to go from so high in the society, or really so high in the society knows, to so low in the society. And he went into the thighs of the society and even into the calves of the society, which is, Malcolm had already been there. And King started seeing some of the harsh stuff that he had not seen before. In fact, the FBI and their attempts to scare him, particularly in 65 and 66, was because of the fact that he moved so quickly and rapidly into the calves and the thighs of the society. And really because he moved into the thighs of the society, they didn't want him going any deeper. They knew, even if they couldn't explain it, they knew instinctively what this meant. Dr. King made a trek there, but still held his position up here. He still held his position up here. And then he started talking about the problems, the decomposition in the thighs of the society. Something that Malcolm already knew. I'm going to get back to Malcolm in a minute. When he started doing that, you got to understand, and this is metaphysical information that you need to sear into your brain. We have in the lungs. The lungs are an important portion of 3 chakras: the heart chakra, the solar plexus, and at the bottom portion of the lungs, the navel. But in the lungs themselves is a lesser chakra on each side of the lungs. In the thighs, there are also 2 lesser chakras. And when you stimulate the lung chakras, the lesser lung chakras, you also can stimulate the lesser chakras of the thighs. Dr. King, going and talking about the decomposition in the thighs, literally was stimulating the breath in the lungs. The breath in the lungs, which means when you stimulate the breath in the lungs take in, it's like the lungs take in information from the environment and then helps the heart that portion of the nation state which is supposed to be responsive to the condition of the body because it has the blood, it helps the heart understand what is supposed to be introduced to the body, what is necessary in the body. And when the lung feels something activated from an energetic level, what it does is it now pulls in the environmental sources to aid in fixing or helping along whatever the rest of the body is doing. Dr. King was now telling the rest, that portion of the body, of the body politic, that we need to pay attention to this, that there is cosmic forces that need to be arrayed to ensure that this decomposition is taken care of. Now you understand why they feared Malcolm. Malcolm came from that. He had it already in his soul that that was a problem. He just didn't know how to fix it yet. Martin knew. So Martin went down in there. Now, by the time Malcolm was experiencing his second death, King had already experienced his first death in another lifetime. His second death was starting to become apparent after he went before the Washington Monument, or the Lincoln Monument, sorry. And he had felt that high almost immediately after he started descending in death. Because who he was, that personality of who he was made into, mostly by this country, they needed a Messiah. King was the country Messiah. He was the United States Messiah. They was praying that they could utilize him for that point and for that reason. The ancestors had a different plan for him. And don't get it twisted. You know, Bobby Hemmett said before that the lady who stabbed Martin Luther King, this black woman who stabbed Martin Luther King, did it because Martin Luther King was being untrue. And I vehemently fought that. But the ancestors tell me that that is in fact what the heck happened. Dr. King lost his ancestral compass as he was being risen to this national figure. And they had to recompose his butt. So he said himself, he got stabbed in the chest. What did I just tell you about the lungs? What did I just tell you about the lungs? They scarred him to save him. They scarred him to save him. So he goes and he gives this rousing speech. He becomes the national Messiah. And those scars activate. Those scars activate. Okay, now it's death time. Because now it's time for your ancestral compass to kick in. And within the next 2 years, he descended. He descended. It is absolutely amazing that we tend to overlook the fact that Malcolm dies amidst, and excuse me, he is excised from the Nation of Islam, and that cuts off the nation from being able to work in a lot of black communities, because a lot of black people in those communities loved Malcolm. You cut out Malcolm, you have no connection to these communities. Dr. King, during this time, is starting to move towards wanting to see the urban poor, wanting to understand why they're rioting. Who else would have been better to help him understand this than Malcolm X? The reason they killed Malcolm in the early portion of 1965 is because, one, yes, they knew Malcolm and Martin were trying to détente and trying to get together, but two, because white people aren't stupid. They read astrology. They go to oracles, and what those astrological readings were telling them, what those oracles were telling them, well, the moment these two get together, it is going to be like two sides of a plug getting together. Malcolm had the wisdom of the streets, but he knew what was wrong. He just didn't have the actionable organization to be able to take it to take care of it. Martin didn't know what was wrong, but he had the organization. He had the organization. When Malcolm experienced his second death, and what really culminated it was when he went to Mecca. When he experienced his second death, he was at his most vulnerable. Now here we're going to leave the I was going to say we're going to leave the analogy of the oak tree, but he was at his most vulnerable because now there are all these other trees in the forest, most of which were smaller than what he wanted, to the size that he needed to grow to. They were smaller than the size that he needed to grow to. So he had to now contend with them for space. But he didn't get that. Now, as he is going through his process, and I think actually I'd say he didn't get that. I think maybe he did get that. So as he's going through his process of this second death, and he's stretching his wings out so he can actually, and it's kind of funny, we use the word stretching the wings out, and I'm looking at my Ma'at statue, and she has her wings out. So he was stretching his wings, and he was flying. And these people who had been studying mysticism and alchemy for over 300, 400 years, thanks to the Moors, they knew what he was going through, and they knew they had to stop him. They talked to the oracles. They talked to the astrologists, and they said, yeah, you need to stop it. If you don't want things to change, then you need to stop it. The problem was they ignored the second half of the prophecies, which was the minute pain that they would have experienced, and it was going to be painful for them. The minute pain that they would experience over the coming 5 to 10 years, the coming decade basically, into the late 70s, would have led to a grand age of prosperity. So he comes back, and he's preparing to tell the truth about the Nation of Islam and some of the other stuff that he had in his mind. And they knew that if they didn't get him, there's always points, and I need to emphasize this. When you are a public figure, and you are known to be going through the alchemical process, there are always points where the ripples of consequences are the least. Where you can look at the astrological influences, you can look at the oracles, you can look at the numerical propheticness of the time period, and you can find these points. Some of them are scattered widely, some of them don't exist. But some of them are scattered widely, some of them don't exist, some of them are compressed. But you can find these periods, these time periods, these valleys, where if you remove a person, if you kill a person, if you injure them, the consequences would be smaller than they would be. The backlash would be smaller than they would be if you did it at other times. They figured out one of these such places and one of these such times, and it was within a 2-week period in February of 1965. That's when they hit him. Malcolm had to have known that this was going to happen. So he chose to walk into that doorway. And he was tired. He was tired. So it must be seen for what it is. He was tired. So he walked into the doorway and crossed over. Martin was going through his death. And Martin, the history books do not record this, was delighted to be meeting with Malcolm. He was delighted. He was looking forward to it. Why? Because Martin had started seeing the limitations in his own organizations, and he had started seeing the bureaucratic laziness of some of the people in his organization. And he needed people, and he was starting to attract some of those people. It was great how the ancestors work when you are aligned with what they want to happen. He started attracting some of those people who were ready to get stuff done. You know, I know some people in the Black consciousness community right now are attacking. They're attacking one of the icons of the civil rights movement. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank on his name. They're attacking him because he's gay. They're attacking him because he's gay. And you know, leaving aside what I think of homosexuality, there are some people who are going to get stuff done. And he was one of the people who were going to get stuff done. And yes, he was held at arm's length by a lot of the civil rights movement establishment because he was homosexual. But they did not doubt his active commitment, especially as people like Dr. King moved further into this death state. So Dr. King was looking forward to meeting with Malcolm and to forming this alliance, which, by the way, would have exploded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. There were rumors at the time of his death that Dr. King was looking to leave the Southern Christian Leadership Conference because he realized that it was not there to function the way that he was originally told that it was there to function. That there were people in his own camp who were working against his new agenda. So he had put together a number of high profile, even though they weren't like, you know, people didn't talk about him, it wasn't in the news or anything, but he had put together a bunch of high profile meetings with other big activists, other big names, and he was starting to coalesce a new circle of advisors that were probably going to be part of this new organization. If he and Malcolm had come together, they would have probably spun off within a year or so and had their new organization. I mean, this is where the ancestors were leading to. This is what they were leading to. But anyway, so Malcolm is dead now. He's dead. And so now 1966, Dr. King is in Malcolm's old neighborhood. Well, technically, he's now into the thighs and the calves of society. He's into the thighs and calves of society. He's seeing the problems there. So now he's moving back up. And in late 1966, he gives a statement in front of Congress, a huge statement, by the way, which they should have audio of, but I haven't been able to find that yet. He goes and gives a statement in front of Congress. He goes to the lungs of the society, ladies and gentlemen. He goes to the heart of the society where all of the sources of life for the society are held. And he tells them why they need to act on fixing the thighs and the calves. He does this. And he does it at a moment when he is being brutally attacked. Not only by the FBI and the DIA and the CIA, but by people within the Black community for moving towards poverty and not staying focused on just civil rights. And now he's starting to talk about the Black bourgeoisie and the unfailingness in the Black community. And this is the late 1966. He's experiencing his death. And then he comes out against the Vietnam War. decomposition, anybody? Who he was, that national image was gone. It was gone. When he goes to, I think it was Jamaica, to write his book, his last book. Where do we go from here? Dr. King experiences that decomposition totally. When he, in the late 1950s, he went to India. I think it was the late 1950s. But when he went to India, he visited Mahatma Gandhi's grave, and then he went to one of the places where he sat and he meditated for an extended period of time. That was his national image. That was where his national image was created. It's metaphysically speaking. That was his national image. But that shoot going down, that national image was created in 1966. Dr. King goes to Jamaica. He goes to Jamaica. He's under a lot of pressure. He's trying to figure out what is happening in the society. Where does he fit? That national image, which really had its peak and its height in 1963, I have a dream. The dream is dead because the national image is dead. He goes to Jamaica and he's writing and he's working and he's meditating and he's praying. Dr. King takes a voyage when he's in Jamaica. This is something that isn't talked about. And elders wrote about this. I wish I could remember who it was, because I found this absolutely stunning when I heard this. Dr. King takes a voyage. I want you to think on it real quick. He's in Jamaica. Who's buried in Jamaica? Who is buried in Jamaica? Give me 1 second, please. I want to make sure my information was right. But who's buried in Jamaica, family? Another Messiah. Another person moved by the ancestral spark. One Marcus Garvey. It was said that Martin Luther King went to see his grave and sat upon his grave and prayed and meditated upon his grave. And he made a statement when he came back from Jamaica, which he had made previously when he was in that room in India that Gandhi had sat and prayed and knelt and what have you for however long he did it. He said, he goes, I am ready to lead my people when he came out of there. And he came back from Jamaica and he said, I am ready to lead my people. And there was something different about him. Oh yeah, the death was over. The death was over. See, Dr. King, unlike Malcolm, didn't start off as an acorn. Dr. King started off as a sapling. The only problem was he was put in an area where there were a lot of trees, to use that analogy. And there wasn't anywhere for him to go but to have contention with those other trees. He had outgrown that sapling sack. That's why they cut those sacks off, And now he was pushing for his own space. Now he was pushing for his own space. And things were getting dangerous. When he came out against the Vietnam War, he firmly said, I am outgrowing the sapling structure. And I don't even think that's the right freaking phrase for it. I can't think of the name for it. But he was making it known that now he wasn't at the nose anymore. He was moving up here. He was in this portion of the society. And this was fearful, because most black men who have ever ascended there did not have the intellect, and I'm talking out of spiritual and emotional and mental intellect. Concepts they didn't even know existed at that time. They had ideas, but they didn't know they existed yet. They didn't have, excuse me, they didn't have the mental, spiritual, and emotional intellect to actually not only conceive at this level, but to project from it. And so they had to kill him. They had to stop him. Oh, they had to stop him. Now, I'm going to be done here because I think that's what the ancestors are telling me, that I'm going on too long here. So I'm going to finish up in the next 5 minutes or so. But they had to stop him. So he was peering from this, and they had to stop him. And so, again, they looked at when to do it. And to be fair, for Dr. King, there was not. I mean, there was. How do I explain this? With Malcolm, there was actually a lull where they could kill him and the response would have been minimal. But for Dr. King, the lulls were still very high. So they had to find one where they thought the response would be minimal. And I want you to understand that when Dr. King was assassinated, he was advocating for the restoration of the legs of society. Today, we are in a discussion with Bernie Sanders about a part of what Dr. King was talking about. And I need to be very, very clear on that. I may not like what the man says on reparations, but the conversation that he is working with about democratic socialism is part of what Dr. King died for. And this isn't a political thing here. This is just, I'm letting you know the connection. Because this is something that black people should be talking about right now. And it's not because of Bernie Sanders. We should have been talking about this for the last 20 and 30 years. The fact that we haven't, the fact that it's only been a cultural conversation, tells us that we have lost the physical portion of metaphysical. So they looked at the astrological charts, they looked at the oracles, and they knew that if they hit Dr. King before 1971, the next time that there would have been a lull enough where the response to Dr. King's death would have been more tolerable, yeah, there was going to be damage. There was going to be riots. There was going to be stuff burnt down. There was going to be massive unrest. But politically, they thought the ancestors say, in fact, it wasn't 1971. The problem, they thought, the wealthy thought that if they hit him in 1971, from what they were seeing astrologically, the reverberations cosmically would have been less. But the ancestors say something completely different. They don't say 1971. They say 1974, 1975. And they would have hit Dr. King during what would have been they would have had to hit him during what would have been the Watergate scandals, which I think was 73. Which still would have been tremendous. The impact would have been tremendous and explosive. 74, 75 was kind of, they don't explain it so much, but it was kind of this reconciliation weird thing that was when the astrologers really said it. They were like, listen, you should have killed him in 65, because the next time when it's going to be low enough where you might be able to, escape with less pain is 1975. So, but they, oh, okay. So now they're explaining it to me. I'm sorry. 2 sets of astrologers. And, you got to understand that part of integration was about this too. You had the white astrologers, you had the black astrologers. There had been several black astrologers who had started working for the white structure, and they were the ones who said, look, if you hit them before 1975, and by the way, in 1975, it wouldn't have even been worth it because the ancestral plan would have been so far advanced that if you hit them, what's the payback? You're not going to be able to reverse what had been done. So they told him if you hit them before 1975, the pain's going to be devastating. It's going to be harsh. It's going to reverberate for decades. Basically, what we've seen happened. The white astrologer said, well, you can hit them now, but you really need to wait till 1971. The reverberations are still going to be great. They're going to be, major, but they're going to be less than if you do it now. They couldn't wait. They couldn't wait because the prophecies were very, very clear of what would be implemented if Dr. King survived. If he was unable to survive another 10 years, if he was able to go another 10 years, the speeches, the legacy that he would have built, not only for black people, but for internationally, for Africans, for the creation of a third united block of nations that would have been South America, some South American countries, some countries in Africa, some countries in the Pacific. I mean, it would have completely rearranged the social order and the dynamics of the global strategic forces. They were fearful of that. So they said, well, if we kill them now, that's going to stop us from that, and we'll just deal with any other consequences that we have to deal with. And that's when they decided to kill him. They picked a lull spot, which again was massively different than Malcolm X's. And they said, we are going to kill him now, hoping that the devastation won't take down the country. And what you saw was a judgment exacted on the United States at that moment after they killed him. This was metaphysical, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why so many places burned was because this was the judgment upon the nation. It was telling them that you scarred Black America for the foreseeable future. You scarred Black America. We now scar you and say that this will mark the ruin of your nation until you rectify this injustice and you bring into completion what was started through him. See, because Malcolm's mantle went to King. It didn't go to Stokely. But what King hoped to do with Stokely was to give that mantle to Stokely. When King met with Elijah Muhammad, one of the things that they talked about was the Malcolm X controversy. And Elijah Muhammad helped him see what was actually happening with that. And Elijah Muhammad then bestowed upon him prophecies and bestowed upon him a mantle of dignity and worth that came from the Islamic group, and bestowed upon him Malcolm X's mantle, which he had never given away. He didn't give it to anybody. I will not mention names. He did not give it to anybody, but he gave it to King. And King knew from the rights that he had accumulated through the work that he had done on the streets with the people, the importance of this mantle. This is why Dr. King kind of changed after he met with Elijah Muhammad. And Elijah Muhammad told him to give this to a worthy soul. And Elijah gave to him the name of Stokely Carmichael and told him the importance of Stokely Carmichael, told him the importance of several other key Black people, and bestowed upon him the mantles which to bless these people with, so they can then live up to their potential and complete the task that the ancestors had for them. This is the metaphysical significance of Martin King and Malcolm X. We don't talk about it. We need to, and we need to understand it, because man, is it powerful. This is what they have been trying to stop. Dr. King, when he went to every place, and this is something that Malcolm didn't know yet. I mean, he kind of knew it, but he didn't know it. When Martin Luther King traveled to every one of these cities that he went to, he laid a root. He planted a seed. He sparked consciousness. And he utilized nonviolence for one particular reason. Because when you understand what violence is, not self-defense violence, when you understand what violence is, it's greater than murder. Its cost is more devious than murder. When you understand that, and you understand what it actually entails, the spiritual suicide that is initiated with violence, the spiritual energy letting that is initiated with violence, you had to understand that he had to do that. Malcolm didn't get it until late. That's why he came back and said, I think we need to give Martin Luther King everything that he needs. Because he started understanding the importance of it. With Malcolm was utilized metaphysically to stoke the emotionality of black people. Because black people had been holding in their anger and frustration for so long. And this is something that Elijah Muhammad had to teach Martin Luther King. That the role of Malcolm, and Malcolm didn't get this, the role of Malcolm was to stoke the emotionality of black people. So then they could grow outside of that emotionality. Because all of this pent-up rage and frustration was cycling around them to the point where it wasn't trapping them. So you needed somebody to come and to shake that up. To shake that up. And then to direct it, redirect it. And that's what Malcolm was doing. Malcolm lost sight of this purpose because Malcolm didn't understand it. Even Martin wasn't certain 100% about it until the latter portion of his life. One of his speeches, and this is what told me he understood it. One of his speeches, one of the lectures that he gave for the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company, he talked about this. He talked about it. I believe it was in the first lecture that he gave. He gave 5 of them. Technically, the 4th one was a sermon on peace, but he gave 5 of them. The first one, I believe he talked about this. Oh, no. Maybe not. No. He kind of touched on it there, but no. No, actually, yes. Yeah. It was that one. But there was more, which many of them haven't seen the light of day because of their power, but he understood this then. It took him a while, but he understood it then. And he understood the importance of it. And that was something that Malcolm could do that Martin Luther King could never do. He never could quite get a handle on shaking that energy up so it could be released and refocused. He didn't get that. Malcolm did. And that was another reason why white people, having studied all this stuff, knew where Malcolm was going with this. And that was another reason why they feared him and Martin Luther King getting together. Martin didn't understand that emotionality part. He could stimulate the mind. He was good with that. But Malcolm stimulated the heart. He stimulated the emotionality. And white folks know the importance of that. You put both of them together, you put the stimulator of emotionality and you put the stimulator of the mind together, you create a perfect person. Now, there's one more point that I got to make. I said I would quit this like 5 minutes ago, but let me make this final point because this is the whole reason why I did all of this. Malcolm X came from the bottom of the body politic. He came from the navel. He went into the thighs and the calves, and he moved towards the heart. He grew towards the heart. It wasn't that he was rooted still in the navel, even though he had taken all of the lessons that he had learned from there, and he was moving towards the heart. He was moving towards the heart, which is where the power of any nation lies. Martin started in the heart and moved up towards here. The reason why the powers that be feared these guys so much is because Malcolm was moving towards the heart from a lower position, and Martin Luther King, who had started at the heart and had moved up, was taking what he had learned by moving up here and moving back towards the center, or back towards the heart. So when Malcolm died, Martin was moving towards the nose, which was still significant, but he was also simultaneously moving towards the heart. If both of them had met in the heart and had been able to connect their powers, as I was saying to you earlier about the lungs and the power of the lungs, the heart, the connection, the metaphysical connection of regulating the body from these chakras, and being able to appreciate what is going on throughout the rest of the body through the lesser chakras, if they were able to connect in the heart, that would have been a quake, a cosmic quake, an ancestrally cosmic quake that even the white people couldn't have stopped, because now you're talking about magnetism. They would have been pulling in people from all over. Malcolm had the international connections, King had the national connections. You would have seen a block of ancestral force form in the United States, to the extent that by the mid-1970s, the U.S. black population would have been talking about possibly putting together their own country, their own commonwealth. And if not, they would have been, a lot of them would have relocated to Africa to help with the building of an international commonwealth. And that commonwealth structure, which I have talked about, which will be coming up towards the end of this century, would have already been being built. We would have been about generation and a half into it being built. They knew this. They knew it. Because this country would be built, this country would only be resurrected through principles that would be extracted by the black population and would be promoted by the black population. Beloved community, everybody. That's why King talked about it. It would only be resurrected through us. We start building that commonwealth on Africa. Everything we do, they copy. They would have to. And if they refuse, you would see Europeans moving en masse to our commonwealth. It would have drained the power of the wealthy and those who consider themselves at the helm of this country, or did at the time. This is the metaphysical importance of Dr. King and Malcolm X. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. I can't wait to hear what y'all think about this. Peace.